Thank you for watching Valor Studios on YouTube. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Good evening, Boneheads, and welcome to Rollin Bones with Ryan Howard, your RPG treasure trove. I'm your host and king of the Boneheads, Ryan Howard, and welcome one and all to Valor Studios. If this is your first time joining us here at Valor Studios, we are a TTRPG content creator community, and we love sharing our stories with the world. And again, if this is your first time and you like what you see tonight, definitely give us a subscribe down here below my face. And follow us on Twitter at Valor_Studios. You should see a link for that over in the chat. And if you want to share this around after the fact, we do put all of our episodes up on YouTube. You should see a link for that as well. So, YouTube is a place to share this content with all your friends and family who weren't able to make it here tonight. And if you want to discuss the shows or any other RPG related topics, you can join us on our Discord server. That's a great community of RPG lovers and content creators. So we hope you guys will join us there. And lastly, I want to thank everyone who is watching this after the fact, either on YouTube or listening to us via audio. I love that you guys are supporting us in that way. So thank you so much. And remember, if you want to catch the show live and contribute questions to our guests and hear a little bit more about the stuff that we have going on in real time, the campaigns that we're talking about, bring it on over here at 8 p.m. every Monday night. And that's a Central Time. And, this is where the action is every Monday night at 8 p.m. Central, right here at twitch.tv/Valor Studios. So, without further ado, I want to introduce you guys to our guest tonight. Those of you who are Rollin Bones faithful, you have seen this guy before. Last time he was on, we talked about a real bad game. And this time, fortunately, we get to talk about a real good game and one that he created. So without bearing the lead any further, let me introduce the co-host of the Vintage RPG podcast, the creator of 321 Action. Ladies and gentlemen, boneheads alike, welcome John Hambone McGuire. Welcome back, Hambone.
Hey, everybody. Great to be back. Thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, because I have the visual aids here, 321 Action is the game that Hambone created. Available for 321 Action, you have Rocket to Russia, and you also have Escape from Point Nemo, and the game that we'll be talking about for the majority of the time tonight, which is currently on Kickstarter for the next 55-ish hours, Children of Uma.
Very exciting. Kickstarter is interesting with what they consider to be 3 days. And so, yeah, I want to say I think it's going to end at 10 a.m. on Thursday. That's what I intended, but we'll see. We let the dice decide.
Yep. Yeah, it's interesting the way that they start measuring time. It's at a certain point you get down there and it's like I don't know, starts counting down hours at like 4 days left, and you're like, no, I want to see days, not hours. But
Yeah, it went from like 3 days to 69 hours, like that. As a creator, you're constantly like refresh. So it's cool. We made our funding goal. We are, I think, $38 away from unlocking the first stretch goal.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully we can make the $38 in 3 days. We'll see.
Absolutely. Now, since we haven't been able to actually talk about 321 Action on here,
Sure.
I did review it when it came out, but give everyone just kind of like the elevator pitch for 321 Action and what they can expect from this particular game.
Very cool. So 321 Action is a cinematic storytelling RPG where the focus really is on fun and story over physics. The idea here is that you've got a simple roll under system that runs off a single D10. Everything automatically hits, you're only rolling for damage. And we want to give you the ability to play through any kind of movie or story that you could possibly think of. And you tell the game runner, who is the person who runs the game, what you want to do, and you make it so in just one roll. So, say if you are swinging on jungle vines like Pitfall Harry, and there's a bunch of alligators below you, and you blow your roll. So you could either fall, or you could fill the plot hole in 2 sentences, where I'll ask you, like, why do you think you could pull this acrobatic stunt off and not end up in the alligators? And you'll tell me, I went to like the little tumbling gym when I was a kid, and I was the best at jumping from monkey bar to monkey bar. Or you can actually spend your luck points. Now, we use luck instead of hit points. And the idea is that you can always push your luck, but don't push it too far because you're going to die. So you start out with a set number of luck points. If you blow a roll, you can take from your own luck pool to make that roll. You can't use luck to get more damage, but you can use luck to get more ammo if need be. We also use gut penalties, where if you look at luck as the things that will cause you to bleed, guts are for things where you twist your ankle, you roll your knee, you got a bad hangover one day. Guts are your bodily things, but we give you the opportunity to play a story the way you want to play a story, and you're not beholden to the rules of physics, because really you're playing through an action movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the simplicity of explain the plot hole in 2 sentences. That's one of my favorite things about 321 Action is,
Man.
If you can give me a concise explanation that makes sense as it enters my ears, then, by all means, yes, you can do it.
Even if it doesn't make sense, if you make me laugh, I'm going to let you do it. When we came up with this, I'm the co-creator. George Gio Colazzo is the co-creator and the co-writer of all these adventures with me. The fill the plot hole in 2 sentences really came from a seminar that, when I was still drinking, I was day drunk at Gen Con. And there was a writer, speaker who I remember nothing. I couldn't even tell you who it was who said it. It was an amorphous blob far away on the stage. However, they said in writing, most plot holes can be filled in 2 sentences. Like, the difference between you walking out of a movie and being like, man, that sucked because this happened, but there was no setup for this. Or walking out of a movie and go, well, yeah, he just said, like, that's why this happened. And you're like, oh, good enough for me. And so we adopted that for tabletop RPGs. And, one of the things that I learned during the pandemic was hanging out with my goddaughter. I tell this story a lot, but it's true. You watch a toddler enjoying like educational television. One of the things that you realize is most people can count to 10. It seems like a broad generalization, but most people can count to 10 and do simple addition or subtraction. So it's based off a single D10. You roll under your stat. A penalty or a bonus is either going to be a 1, 2, or 3, plus or minus, either way to the roll. And you take it from there. And that's how we like to keep it simple in 321 Action.
Absolutely. Fun fact, that writer's name, Stu Horvath, and all this time he's been afraid to tell you.
Oh my God. If it was Stu the whole time, I'll be losing my absolute shit. Like the mask comes off. It was me all along. It was me, Hambo. It was me.
I could see Stu keeping that under his hat just for all this time. That seems like a very Stu thing to do.
You know what? He plays things so close to the vest. Like I know the inside baseball because we do the Vintage RPG podcast together. However, like, out of nowhere he'd be like, yeah, I'm pitching this book around. You're like, when did you wrote a book? This time, like, he's been a lot more forthcoming about writing books and stuff like that. But he's a mysterious man, and I think that's one of the things I love about him the most, and I find the most appealing about him is that, like, we can be friends for all these years, and we know a lot of the inside baseball, but like, there's always times when he'll still surprise me.
It's like that one episode of the Goldbergs that was dedicated. The A plot was dedicated to Murray just randomly dropping details about his life that his kids had never heard before.
Yeah, yeah. And out of nowhere, they're like, but you didn't. He's like, I thought I told you that. It's like, no, you've never told us this story. Yeah, I mean that's kind of what it's like. Stu and I worked at a record store together, so we both live in the town of Kearney. I live closer to Kearney Ave. He lives a little further towards Schuyler Ave, but we both worked at a record store together for a while. Place called St. Mark's Records, and our friend Bobby, who we miss dearly. He owned the place, he ran the place, but Stu worked like the first shift. I worked the second shift. I'd come off of like a food delivery job, and I'd work there before I went to work at the bar I was working. And I was a musician. I had like 4 jobs. And Stu at the time had like the long trench coat on. He had long hair. He had glass. Yes, Stu had long hair. He had glasses, like the round sunglasses, like you know when he tells you like one of his favorite bands is Sisters of Mercy, you believe him because you would have taken one look at Stu in like the early like 2000s or like that dude like Sister of Mercy, but he'd be leaving. And for the longest time, there was always this muscle car parked around the block from the record store. And it would, he'd walk around the corner and when I'd get out, like it would be gone. So in my brain, I correlated like, all right, this dude is driving like this badass old muscle car to the record store when he only lives like a few blocks away. I was like, that's so tough. And then years later into our friendship, I was retelling the story. He goes, I've never owned that muscle car. And I was like, God, I wish you'd never told me that. But he went from, looking like a dude who listens to Sisters of Mercy to looking like a writer, which is a very, like, I think a good look because it doesn't take a lot of work to kind of get there, But, he's doing great. His book is coming out from MIT Press. I don't not remember the title of it because it's not a great title. It's an awesome title. I don't remember the title of it because on the Vintage RPG podcast, since he announced the book, I've been referring to it as technically titled Experience Points because that was the original title. So I can't. I don't have the mental bandwidth to move that over to put the new title in. But yeah, he's got a book coming out from MIT Press. It's going to be awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he and I have talked about it, and when he's ready to do press for the book and when it's coming out, he will bring Stu back on. And we're probably also going to talk more about Chaosium when he comes on, because I knew what would happen is I bring Stu on to talk about Chaosium. He's going to talk about some Chaosium.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how in the weeds we could get, though. So there's like whole games we didn't even cover when he was on.
Yeah, so I didn't even know what a Chaosium was when I met. Like I knew what Dungeons and Dragons was. This predates my time in RPGs. Like everyone knew what Dungeons and Dragons was. I watched the cartoon. Like I knew what dice were, but like for the life of me, had I known, our conversations would have taken a very different turn back in the day. Man, we would have I would have been playing D&D a lot sooner. I didn't start into RPGs until I was 25. But when we were working at the record store, I was like 22, maybe 23. I would have loved to have gotten in that early.
Absolutely. Now, with this this Kickstarter that you have going on, Children of Uma, just looking at the art, you can tell it's got that kind of Road Warrior vibe to it. So I'm going to ask you, what kind of are your inspirations for Children of Uma? What is it that that really spoke to you, pop culturally speaking, that inspired Children of Uma?
So it's funny. The way it worked out was this. Point Nemo was my like inception into wanting to write. George's wife Jen had told me the story about Point Nemo one day, and I was like, "This is great." Someone should. I wish someone would write a comic back. This is awesome. She said, "You should write. Just write the book, Handle." And so I started writing it, and that's how the RPG came up. And then Geo got on board. We changed the rules up a bit, and his ideas for the rules were just amazing. His ideas on where we decided to take Point Nemo and Rocket to Russia were fantastic. And so we started working on horror. We had the bones of the horror game. We had like the big villain. We had the reveal. All the stuff. It was all there. Midway through the first episode, he hits me up and he's like, "Hey, buddy, I want to write a apocalyptic car RPG." I was like, "Okay, well, get at it for horror." He's like, "No, I want to do it now." And he's like, "What would you think about changing it up?" And I was like, "Yeah, man, if that's what you're feeling, that's what we're doing." So, we both grew up loving Mad Max. We both grew up loving the Warriors and movies like, you know, movies about like gangs and bands and stuff like that. Streets of Fire, all, wild stuff. So, he had this idea to put together the story about it's 2060 Kansas. It's the future. It's America. So everything runs on electric or carbon plus. Um, you're in a place where you're never going to run out of bullets because it's America. We'll never run out of bullets. So you don't have to worry about like resources and like, am I going to have enough ammo? So we wanted to do the post-apocalypse a little different. It's a futuristic dust bowl. And most of the people who are surviving in these areas are kids or teenagers. Everyone's trying to get by. Everyone's trying to do their thing. So you're all bands. Whatever group you're in, whether you're the Death Point Raiders, the Blue Dragons, the Helsings, who are the main band in the story, you're all bands because, calling them gangs, even though we did take a lot of influence from the Warriors, it really does connotate something different. But a band is a group of people who do stuff together, like Robin Hood, the Band of Merry Men. So it's a little more freeing to do it and call them bands. And so in the Wasteland, you have all your different types of vehicles. And when George was like, I want to do an honest to God vehicle battle RPG, we put our heads together and we came up rules for using vehicles, which is kind of a weird pivot, I think, from going from a traditional tabletop RPG where you're like, I'm going to run and I'm going to do this, and maybe I'll drive a car here and there, to you're predominantly driving cars in this thing. So we came out with a set of rules. And you know what? If you're watching this now and you're curious about 321 Action, if you go to 321actiongames.com, you could download the rule set for free. We got a free rule set of Drive Through RPG as well. We always want the rules to be free. We always want people to have the opportunity to play the game. And the rule set is pretty seamless. This stacks right on top of it because our goal with anything that we do is to not make you have to learn a bunch of extra rules when you're already comfortable playing a game. So this is, I think, depending on how it gets laid out, a page and a half, maybe 2 pages of additional car rules that just rest nicely on top of the rules as they are already. And then, that's it. You're going to be spending most of the time in the vehicles. There's some stealth on your feet missions. There's some really weird, surprising stuff that's going to pop up later. But, we wanted to not limit ourselves because, George's like, what about monster trucks? Throw them in. The only thing that we couldn't get in because you are landlocked in the middle of a dust bowl is water vehicles. And we found a workaround for that because if we reach 8K, which is just $32 away currently, you unlock another adventure called Mini Submania, where you're the Helsings chapter of the Waikiki chapter of the Helsings, and you've got 4 aquatic vehicles, and you get to fight some weird stuff under the water off of Hawaii. Nice. So, you got air vehicles, you got monster trucks, you got lots of different ground vehicles, some really interesting twists on some vehicles that you're familiar with, like school buses and stuff like that. And what I think is a really compelling story that runs, I think, 6, we call them episodes, instead of, you have like 3 or 4 encounters in an episode, so there's 6 episodes in total. So it's a full-length book.
Gotcha. Now, over the course of answering that question, you mentioned Streets of Fire. So I have to ask, when it comes to the film work of one Michael Paré, do you prefer Streets of Fire or Eddie and the Cruisers? Which one? I know those are weird movies to compare to each other, but which one do you find more entertaining?
So it's interesting because in New Jersey, I grew up because it's about a band at the Jersey Shore. So Eddie and the Cruisers is in my blood. It's a part of my DNA. Streets of Fire, I found out about later because, remember pre-internet, like you had the video store and Streets of Fire was a bomb for all intents and purposes. Like it was supposed to be a trilogy where Michael Paré was going to play Tom Cody for like 3 films, but it performed so poorly and there was no Netflix or anything to pick it up and run with it because it's a cult classic that it got buried. So I didn't hear about it until later. And I had only heard about it because of The Warriors, which is another Walter Hill movie. So in my headcanon, Streets of Fire happens after Eddie fakes his death and just needs to get away. And, Like in my brain, like Eddie is also Tom Cody.
Mhm.
I love them for different reasons. I mean, the soundtrack to by John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown Band for Eddie and the Cruisers is it's timeless. It really is, and it's like a knockoff of a lot of other songs you already know and love. But it's just so perfect. But then, like, Streets of Fire is like so cool and stylized. In my humble opinion, one of the best posters for a movie ever. So, you know what? I gotta say, it's a foot race. Depending on the day you ask me, I might change my answer. But today, I'm gonna say Streets of Fire.
Gotcha. Gotcha. See, and I didn't even think about that when I asked the question. Having never even been to New Jersey in my life, I didn't even think about the connection there.
Yeah,
But yes, Eddie and the Cruisers is so like intrinsically tied to New Jersey itself and like the Jersey Shore bar band scene.
yeah. It's interesting because it's a generational thing.
Hmm.
You really look at my generation, I grew up in the late 80s, early 90s. Like I really came into my own in the early 2000s. Like if you didn't grow up in like the mid to late 80s, early 90s, like by the 2000s, no one knew what Eddie and the Cruisers was. Like around here, it was like it was a ghost in the snow. It was gone. But I'm hoping that like one day it hits Netflix and everyone's like, "Oh my god, this is something special." But yeah, I mean, you really have to be like mid to late 80s to like 1999 is probably the cutoff for people who've heard of Eddie and the Cruisers in New Jersey.
Mhm. I only my dad for some reason wanted me to watch that movie with him one time, and again, he also is not from New Jersey, but yeah, it's one of those really magical movies, and I think people don't realize that song you occasionally hear on classic rock stations on the dark side. It's from that
Yeah,
movie. So,
yeah, and people think it's like different artists.
mhm,
Like somewhere out there, John Cafferty is like still grateful for those royalty checks. So
mhm,
good on him.
absolutely. No, the car combat aspect of Children of Uma with a hard snap away from Eddie and the Cruisers and back to the game at hand here. It's a really, like you said, it's an interesting thing because off the top of my head, the only vehicle combat RPGs that come to mind are things like Lancer, which is more mechs than anything else. So I do feel like this kind of fits a Oh, Car Wars, as Gregory's mentioned here in chat, Car Wars as well. But I feel like this fits very nicely into a void that people are feeling. And when you think about it, car rules and vehicle rules in general become very essential when you have any kind of RPG that you hope to set in like modern times. Which is why, Savage Worlds dedicates a whole bunch of its pages to car rules and why the James Bond RPG, which is very near and dear to my heart, has such extensive chase mechanics. So seeing this for 3-2-1 action, I'm excited to see how it fits kind of within the simple, easy to pick up, easy to understand rule set of 3-2-1 action.
Well, I've never played Car Wars. I
Mhm.
think Geo had when he was younger because Geo got into RPGs. He's an OG. Like he
Mhm.
got in there like years before I did. He's been playing since he was in like grammar school, junior high. So I never had the pleasure of playing Car Wars. I've only heard great things from people who love the game. Because you have to also imagine at the time there wasn't a ton of different RPGs out there, and it wasn't like you're into this or you're into this. Like, you couldn't just like click on the link and download a PDF and like try it out. Like you're investing in something. So people who I know who love it will swear by it, and they will always try to get you to play it with them, which I think is awesome. And it speaks a lot to the awesomeness of Car Wars. With this, like everything else, we wanted people to just lose themselves in the game. The highest compliment that I've gotten so far about Children of Uma is that people feel like they are racing in cars, and like the adventure just doesn't stop, the action doesn't stop. Because basically, like, say if you're riding a dirt bike and there's an 18-wheeler ahead of you, so you tell the game runner, well, I have a handgun that's not getting anywhere. I want to race up to the side of the 18-wheeler. I want to kick off my bike and have it like roll under the back and try to like blow out the back tires to stop this thing. Okay, make an action check. So in that instance, I'd be like, well, that's going to be kind of crazy. Make an action check, +2, or fill a pothole in 2 sentences. Tell me why you feel like you can just, you know, do this mid-air somersault and land like superstar and like not worry about like breaking your ankles. And they'll be like, well, when I was a kid, I kept jumping off a fence running away from a gas station we used to throw eggs at. So I got really good at not rolling my ankles when I escaped. All right, well, just give me a straight action check then. So it's stuff like that. And then, ideally, when you're in the cars, there's no armor in 3-2-1 action. There's no concept of armor, because it's just, you're just out and about, you're doing your thing. However, if you have a flak jacket, it'll give you extra luck points. Or if you have like your lucky rabbit's foot, it'll give you a few extra luck points. The car takes all the damage when you are in Children of Uma. If you're in a vehicle, even if you're on a motorcycle, the damage will always go to the vehicle before it hits you. If you are outside of your vehicle or standing next to the vehicle, you are completely vulnerable and can get your ass kicked. So, we want people to have the experience of being in a high-speed chase. We want people to have the experience of trying to outrace a bad guy, or have the experience of, I'm flying in this glider, because there are airborne vehicles, and my friends aren't getting anywhere with this big SUV. I am just going to crash into the back of it and see what we can do. And that happens in almost every game. Someone in the glider is like, well, I've taken enough damage. I'm going to land it where it's going to land, and we're going to take it from there. But, every vehicle has different kind of weapons either built into it, or you can upgrade and customize your vehicles. So, in the first adventure, episode 1, you're chasing a convoy with just the vehicles that you have, which, the Doom Buggy has a harpoon gun on it. One of the other vehicles has front-facing guns. The ATV has a rack mounted around it that's a chainsaw, so you could actually be like a rolling chainsaw. But after that, you go back to your headquarters. You could trade out vehicles. You could even, once you get past certain scenes, we call it's essentially an unlockable. So you start with 6 playable characters. As you go through the game and you get past certain scenes, you can now just swap out. So if you start as Dog and you get to the headquarters and you're changing out vehicles, you can say, you know what, I'm going to play as Fox now. And that's what the Hellsings are. The Hellsings are a band of kids and teenagers. All their motorcycle helmets have adornments on them that make them look like specific animals, because they're a pack of wild animals roaming through the wasteland. So every member of the Hellsings has a one-word name of an animal. So like the leader's Croc. We have a bat, we have a cat, we have a bear and a cub who are, a mother and a son. So, you're not tied into the same person you go to the dance with in Children of Uma.
Now, I asked this next question because I know that you are a huge music guy as well as an RPG guy, and same here. So when you are playing Children of Uma, what bands are playing in your head, or would you play at your table running this game?
So it's interesting, because part of me just wants to say it's all Motorhead. But, Gio and I went back and forth on this. And, the beauty of having a partner in this is that it's not just me creating. It's Gio. It's me and Gio. And I'm like, hey, this is your story idea. What do you want the soundtrack of Children of Uma to be? Like, what do you hear in your head? I'm gonna read you some of the songs that he picked out for the soundtrack of Children of Uma, and so it's pretty wide ranging. So, Woody Guthrie, because you're the Dust Bowl, Queens of the Stone Age, Health, Ennio Morricone, Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band, Guar, Maximum the Harmone, Kansas Clutch. It's not necessarily what you think, because remember, it's a cinematic story, so it's not just you know, one kind or one style of band, but for me, it's all Motorhead. It's all, when we're racing and we're trying to like have these vehicle battles, that's all I hear is Motorhead.
Mhm. I'll be honest. The first thing that came to mind when I was formulating this question was "We Are the Road Crew." But now that you've said Queens of the Stone Age, having listened front to back to Songs for the Deaf several times, and in a previous life doing a whole podcast on it, that whole album could fit in with this setting.
Oh yeah. Oh dude, hands down. I mean, my version of the soundtrack was which I've been meaning to put together, but it's Motorhead. My Queens of the Stone Age would be Feel Good Hit of the Summer,
Mhm.
nicotine value, Vicodin, like that drivingness to it. The dwarves I had on my this soundtrack that I sketched out. Um, More Motorhead. I had a lot of like fun ideas for it and stuff, but all really fast, fast paced. But second episode you were on a stealth mission, so you're actually on foot behind enemy lines. So it
Mhm.
does change up. And one of the things that was important to us is that every episode doesn't feel like the one before it. So the first one, and I'll give some spoilers here. First one, you are in a high speed chase, chasing down a convoy because you think they have supplies. Second one, episode 2, you're on foot, infiltrating an enemy band's territory, trying to steal a supply truck. Third one of your people gets captured. You have to go into an arena and fight monster trucks. Essentially, it's Monster Jam, uh,
Mhm.
but with like vehicles with weapons. Fourth episode, um, someone steals your stuff and you got to get it back in a city environment now. You're out of the plains now. You're in the cities, and then the next one is I'm not going to go that far, but yeah, it's different. Even that one is different. That's a jailbreak, but whatever. Um, and then you have the big finish. So each you're not going to be like, oh, we've done this already. Like every episode feels different. Every episode is a different vibe, and you get to not just like have the vehicles that you have, which are customizable. One of the cool things that we wanted to get across in Children of Uma is that you can steal any vehicle. You can commandeer any vehicle. Like you are racing down the street, and the person next to you has a vehicle that's not just cooler than your vehicle, it is more deadly than your vehicle. You can make an action check +3, which is that essentially the highest check that you can make to dive over to their vehicle. And on the next turn, you have to fight that person to get control of their vehicle. So you are not beholden to just the vehicles you start with. I mean, there's tanks, there's like a bomber plane, there's different kinds of dirt bikes, ATVs, sports utility vehicles. So as of this conversation, not including the sub that we had like drawn so people could see what Mini Submania could look like, there are 25 plus playable vehicles in Children of Uma, and that's part of the reason why the budget's so high is because a third of the budget is going to getting these vehicles drawn by Tim Burns. Um, because when we're telling you you've got a vehicle battle RPG, we don't want to just be like, well, you have 7 vehicles to choose from. Good luck. It's like, no, you can steal any vehicle in this game. So I mean, I think there might be like 30 all said and done, maybe.
Nice.
But like, you can't walk into Children of Uma and be like, yeah, but like they're not going to have a vehicle that I want to drive. There's armored vehicles like World War II style, or like the little they're not tanks, but they're fully armored vehicles that like the cops used to like bust into stuff with. Like
Mhm.
anything goes, man.
Nice. Yeah, those of you who are gearheads out here, this should be speaking your language. Um,
Yeah,
and
don't quote me on any of the specs. Like you'll see next to every vehicle, there's like a height, a width, a weight. It's all approximate. It's just to give you an idea of what you're doing with. But like, I do research, but don't do research.
absolutely. And it's not like it's that kind of game. I mean, there are games that can get super super crunchy in that regard. I think the game that I mentioned earlier, Lancer, I think gets pretty crunchy
Yeah.
In that realm of like what specifically you've got, attached to your vehicle. And I know the James Bond game can get kind of intense with all the different stats that cars have. But with a game that's this focused on get to the action, don't bore us, get to the chorus kind of thing, that doesn't surprise me.
That's awesome. I'm definitely going to use that. Don't bore us, get to the chorus. That's like, that is so perfect. My God, that's so perfect. You know, a lot of what 3-2 action is all about is the broad strokes. The nuance comes from the players. Like when I'm telling you how big something is, I just want you to know how big the room is. Or like I just want you to be like, oh, so that is like a lot bigger than my motorcycle, or this car is a lot smaller than that car. But that's really all it is. Like the real magic from action comes from the players. And all we've ever tried to do is create an environment for them to just play and have fun with it. Every playtest that I've had, people are like, "This sounds ridiculous, but I want to do this." Okay, we'll figure it out. Let the dice decide. It's not a big deal. I think that there's no real wrong way to play games. Like there are people out there who love nuance, they love crunch, they love a lot of math, and that's great because there are games out there for people who are into that stuff. There's people who are like, I've never played a game before, but like that looks like fun. Let me try that. And then there's games that people like that too. Like there's no wrong way to play. There's no wrong edition of like Dungeons and Dragons or like whatever you're into. Like find people to play with, have fun.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Now, this might be a hard question to answer because now that I think about it, I'm having trouble formulating an opinion here. But since we're both wrestling fans, I got to throw at least one of these questions out there. When it comes to commandeering a vehicle in the world of Children of Uma, what wrestling finisher do you think is most effective in getting someone to turn over the wheel?
So the other night, I had someone do a missile drop kick through like the back window at an angle of like a truck. Because you know how like trucks, they have like the big back window, you get a little slider in there. And they came in and they kind of ran into like the full missile drop kick. That like yeeted the dude right out of there at the same time. Um, it's hard because if you're like, you try to get on a motorcycle, you
Mhm.
could super kick someone off a motorcycle, like
Yeah,
hanging off the car, like super kick, person's going off the motorcycle. A lot of wrestling moves require you though to be attached to the person you're doing it with.
yeah,
So like even like say a rough rider, um, you're you're going off the edge with that person. Um, I think maybe like uh, a hammerlock, you know, to get someone kind of like uncomfortable and kind of working their way out the door. So like you come through the passenger side, you grab the person's arm, you twist it into a hammerlock. You're kind of like they're kind of arching their back because the hand, for those listening and watching at home who may not know what the hammerlock is a wrestling move. You're gonna get the arm behind there. You're gonna be popping it up and under. So I think the hammerlock would be an effective one. Missile drop kick if you can get it hit the right way. Yeah, but most wrestling moves require you to be attached, and that's a problem. Super kick if you're on a motorcycle. Um, I got to think about that more because there's got to be one. Because everything like I'm thinking about, like it doesn't benefit you. I think maybe if you are on a raised platform and it's kind of like a ship wheel kind of thing. You could grab someone, you could put them in a suplex and just dump them over the side or body slam them over the side. But yeah, my answer definitively is hammerlock in a car style vehicle, super kick on a motorcycle vehicle.
gotcha. One that came to mind, I imagine with a lot of these vehicles, there's going to be someone on the back of a truck or in a turret with a
Yeah,
machine gun.
yeah.
And in that case, I would have my character break out my favorite wrestling move of all time, the Enziguri.
Oh, the Enziguri would be great in a situation like that. Um, or yeah, Enziguri would be great in a situation like that. Um, or if you get the person the right way, Alabama slam them Off the Edge would be another good one.
Mhm. And again, for those of you out there who are not wrestling fans, the enziguri is basically a jump kick to the head.
Yeah.
Is the best way to describe it. Uh, and it's my favorite because it's so crisp. It's so cool to see one done correctly. If you want to see a great example of someone doing an enziguri, just go on YouTube and type in Seth Rollins enziguri, and you'll see it. Or you could go back to the OGs and see Bad News Brown do what he called the Ghetto Blaster in the 80s.
Perfect enziguri. Yeah, I mean, also like say if you're fighting on the rooftop of a bus and you slide in like an RKO out of nowhere,
Yeah.
I'll allow it. Because I'm just gonna say the other person up there that you hit it is gonna sell for you. They're gonna bounce. They're gonna flop like a fish off the side. It's not a big deal.
Definitely.
That's
Definitely.
a great question. Tough question. I love it.
Mhm. So once Children of Uma is out, at that point, are you guys going to go back to the horror game that you were working on, or where would you like to go next with 3-2-1
Yeah,
action?
definitely going back to horror. Horror is the fall. So I made Gio promise, like we're going back to horror. He said we're going back to horror. Um, so one of the things that he and I talked about was we want to make sure that when we put out something, we continue to put out things to support that style of game and not just like be like a one and done kind of thing. So you had Rocket to Russia and Point Nemo, which is essentially the prequel and the main story. Um, we did Kevin Saves Christmas. Now, here's a fun little tidbit that we haven't talked about, but Kevin Saves Christmas is something that we did as a PDF for everyone who backed us on our first year. We just gave it to you. We produced a full color PDF, which is a Christmas adventure that takes place on the island of Point Nemo. And we just gave it away to everyone. The only way you got it is if you backed us on the first year. So this year, we're actually going to tweak a couple things and actually sell it. So Kevin Save Christmas will be out probably around Christmas. But with that and with Children of Uma, we've supported the action title. And horror, we got the story. We have the story. We have Gio's got a story, and I've got a story. Gio's story is the one we had really fleshed out, and then we're going to be doing that one for the Kickstarter. My story needs more work. However, one of the things we started doing, a friend of the show, I know, Levi Combs, Plan X Games. I love that guy. If you're watching, Levi, love you, man. He posted on Twitter, out of the blue, these old pamphlet games that he made. And, we've only written like 100-page games. And I was like, oh man, I could never do something like that. And I was like, no, I can do that. I wrote a book. I can figure this out. So, as promotional material, we started writing pamphlet adventures. So like when I went to GaryCon, I had a pamphlet. It was called Grounded for Life, which is the epilogue. And you got it right there too, right? You got the pamphlet.
Yep.
Yeah. It's the epilogue to Point Nemo. It's a solo play adventure where you get to break your grandmother out of the nursing home for one last adventure. So for Children of Uma, you're also, besides getting Children of Uma, you're also going to get the pamphlet adventure eQuest, which we did, where it's a solo play adventure. You play Moose, one of the Helsings in Switzerland, near the Wispel Mountain, and you are being chased. And this is the thing: Uma is a mutagen. Essentially, it's the ultimate military adrenalizer. I got the idea from Pulp Fiction, where Uma Thurman is dying from an overdose, and John Travolta's like, say something. He jabs into her, something, and she gets by the shot to the heart. So I modified that for Children of Uma, and so that's why it's Uma. But I had to figure an acronym: ultimate military adrenalizer. But it could mutate you, so you're being chased by mutant yetis in Ski Quest. So with horror, I am not going to tell you the name of the adventure because it's something that I wanted to kind of be a surprise. But the horror story that I am going to write, I made a solo play adventure. It's done. Cheese Hasselberger, who is an awesome dude who's done a ton of work for Levi. He works with us all the time. He's like one of my favorite people in the world. He plays in my Monday night DCC game. He's like killer artist and he's a killer layout guy. So he's laid out all these solo play adventures. So the third pamphlet is a horror adventure. And you'll get that when we kickstart 321 horror, or maybe before. We'll get bored, we'll probably release it. But horror is next, and we have another dude who wants to write for us. We want him to write for us, and he's got a horror idea as well. So we're just trying to wrap our heads around it. But even with that, maybe like an extra page of rules that are specifically for the horror gimmick. But like, if you know how to play action, you could drop in the horror game. You're like, okay, I need to know this and this. Done.
Now, when it comes to the stories that you and Gio are writing right now, without giving too much away, what genre of horror are each of you going for? Is this like slasher, cosmic, paranormal? What are we talking about here?
Um, so without giving too much away, mine is haunting. Mine's more haunting.
Mhm.
Is more like physical monster.
Gotcha.
That is going to be the main reason that they're there in the story. Our buddy who we're hoping to get working on something is slasher. Because there's so, like, it's horror, man. There's so many different types of horror, but the first three things that we're working on is haunting, monster, slasher, and I wrote. And he and I are kind of going back and forth on it a little bit, trying to refine it. But zombie survival rules. I wrote zombie survival rules,
Hmm.
which is it's that sweet spot between horror and action. But I had to figure out like what the gimmick was and how that would work, how it works if you get bitten, turning this, that, and the other thing. So we're just going back and forth on that. The zombie rules might be a pamphlet. With just like bonus rules or like a quick little solo adventure and like so you get to understand it. My partner Sally, she she's really big on the idea of a western, so we're gonna get to westerns eventually. I've got the quick draw rules all written up, and Gio and I went back and forth on that, and we've settled on the quick draw rules. Now it's just the zombie rules. We're a little shaky on, but we got to figure that out.
Mhm. What, of Western is very near and dear to my heart as well.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to 3, 2, 1 draw or whatever you guys
Yeah.
end up going with on that one.
Yeah, I love westerns. I love it,
Mhm.
and I sat there like I don't know how long it's been since you've seen Tombstone, but about a couple months back, I was like looking for something to watch. And it was on one of the streamers I was on. I was like, "Well, this is my night," and I just sat on that couch and I just loved it. And in my brain, it's not so much because I'm sure like every Western game has quick draw rules.
Mhm.
Uh, and not saying one is better than any of the others, but it's more about which is what we're finding ways to make rules that work with the rule set that you have already,
Mhm.
because it's everything's got to fit. So we figured that out. Western actually wasn't that bad. Zombie, it's like there's a couple of things that are still on the board where we gotta figure out the moves, but I feel good
Mhm.
about it and I love it. I get to make games with my best friend. I get to like tell the stories I've always wanted to tell, and like people actually play it and enjoy it. So win.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah, I imagine with zombies, one of the big challenges would end up being, just dealing with a large amount of uh, opponents at a single time.
Yes and no. Yes, because it's not necessarily you have to worry about so much math. Because at a certain
Mhm.
point, like say the average player will have 24 luck points, right?
Mhm.
The cool thing with luck points is like, at the end of every episode, you roll a d10 and you get that many luck points back,
Yeah.
right? So say if you started, you had 24 luck points. Say if you only lost 2 luck points. But then at the end of the episode, you roll a d10, you roll a 10. Well, now you have 32 luck points. there's no max to luck points because you can just keep getting luckier and luckier and luckier and luckier. I've had players get through entire games and they started with like 23 luck points and they ended up with 41. Like you can find ways around that. But if you get hit with a swarm of zombies and each one is doing potentially 6 points of damage to you and you're swarmed, you're going to have to make a brawn check to try to break free, or an action check depending on the situation. And if you fail that, you're just going to keep getting eaten. And it's not necessarily like, oh, one thing is biting me, you got 12 things biting you, and in those 12 things biting you, you might not make it out. But that's where the respawn rules come in. Like if you get bit, you might not stay dead long. And so, we have a couple things with that, but the idea is keeping it streamlined enough. Like, do you watch The Walking Dead at all? Have you?
Yeah, I've seen a good bit of The Walking Dead.
But there's points where like you see a person seemingly kind of get buried by the zombies, but they manage to kind of like GI crawl their way out of it and like escape. And you're like, well, how the hell did that happen? And again, it's story and fun over physics. But like if you think about it, like if these doofs are all falling over each other trying to bite you, like it probably might be harder to bite you than you think, because it's like the world's worst game of Twister, and you're just like, I'm gonna get out of here. But yeah, we'll figure it out. We just have we gotta just swing back around to that once we finish the Kickstarter. But yeah, I love the idea of putting out the things, and then at the end of the year, maybe we'll make a compilation that we'll hook people up with of all the pamphlets, but like in order so you could read them.
Yep.
Like on a computer.
Now, another question I have about 3-2-1 action, because again, last time you were on, we talked about a really bad wrestling game.
Yeah.
Do you think 3-2-1 action would work well for some kind of E-Fed wrestling simulation type gameplay?
I don't know. I will tell you, there are two types of games that I think are going to be the hardest to do for 3-2-1 action. One, there's Worldwide Wrestling, which is, I in my humble opinion, a perfect wrestling game. I know he just did another one. He did a volume 2 of it or whatever. Dick Paladino, great game. You can find it online. It is a perfect wrestling game because he also like goes through all the terminology and stuff. Like, so if you're not really understanding what kayfabe is, he's got a whole page on it, and you're like, oh, I get it now. Or like, giving someone the rub, the Iggy, going home. Like, it's a game like that already exists.
Yeah.
So I don't know that we would have something that we could bring to the party that would work. Also because I think he does that Powered by the Apocalypse. Like, so I mean, it can be done, but like with something that is that like awesome and perfect already exists, and I don't really have a strong idea on how to make it work, I probably wouldn't do it. But that's not saying like it's not on my massive wrestling fans. Of course, it's on my mind, but like I don't know. The other one that I think is hard to tackle is a mystery game. Because our games are very cinematic. When you are in any kind of action adventure that we write, there are NPCs that you are essentially playing in the movie with them. So in like Rocket to Russia, you had Steve and Yuri, Scorpion and Dag Nasty. In Point Nemo, you had Alexis, Dom, and Eli Tanzir III, and Yuri. Spoilers, whatever. You would have gotten there eventually anyway. But you're essentially like you're playing through the story with them. You're learning more about the world and the story with them. In Children of Uma, you also have NPCs. You have Croc, you've got Scorpion, you got a couple other people, and you learn more about the world by playing with them. So mysteries are hard, man. Like I'm still very new at writing. George's been writing a lot longer than I have, and I feel like I'm a pretty decent writer. But a mystery is a very, very specific kind of writing. Like I watch a lot of mystery programs. I told you before, I'm like watching the Rockford Files right now. But like Magnum, Murder She Wrote, Poirot, like I'm if there's a procedural mystery, I'm watching it.
Mhm.
And I think that because there needs to be, subterfuge, there needs to be the reveal and the aha moment. I think it's hard to, and also there's Gumshoe. Gumshoe system
Yeah.
does it well. The Gumshoe system does it really well. And I think that knowing that we, like Gio and I, have to tell this story, it's a story that you're playing in and get you to that point and give you that aha, or give you that, like, oh my god, it's this, or like, put out the red herrings that you find, and then suddenly, like, you think it's one thing, it's another. That is, I think, really hard to convey in the type of games that we make. I mean, we're gonna get there eventually, and I want to really bad, but like, me personally, I feel like I'm punching above my weight class if I try to do it now, and especially because there is Gumshoe out there, which is great. Like, it's the perfect system for doing that already. So eventually there will be 3, 2, 1 mystery, but not yet. There's a few other things we want to get to first.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's like you said, Gumshoe is very specifically designed for that type of game. It's very combat is almost like not a focus at all. It's possible in Gumshoe, but it's not. What you're there for. Whereas 3, 2, 1 action is, I mean, it's in the title there. Action.
Yeah. Well,
Mhm.
so when you get to things like horror,
Yeah.
you're gonna be running away a lot.
Mhm.
Like, you know, there's still a lot of action, but it may involve you like stealthing, hiding, like trying to figure things out, and like comprehending how your situation is going to let you survive. Um, so there is always going to be action, but it might not be like you shooting monsters. It might be you running
Mhm.
away from the monsters, like setting a classic Freddie Jones booby trap, trying to get the monster to fall into it, or do whatever, like trying to solve a puzzle to escape.
Mhm.
When we get to things like heist, we are work. Eventually we're going to get to the heist game, and like that's going to be like a lot of stealth. That's going to be a lot of like cool checks and charm checks, and things outside of just shooting at people, because you know actions have consequences.
Yeah.
So, when you're racing at top speed, trying to, you know, commandeer a monster truck and raise some hell, that's one thing. When like this creature is stalking you through like wherever you're going to be, that's different. So, we're hoping to extend those types of experiences outside of just like walking and killing stuff.
Mhm.
And that being said, you got the rules. The rules are free. You can tell your own story. Like, if you've like, oh, I have this great idea for like a mystery story. I have a great idea for like, this haunted house story or whatever. The rules are so simple that whatever you need to make work, you can. And you can get to these adventures before we can write them.
Mhm.
There's only two of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, like Hambone said, this is a very uh, easy system to hack, as it were, and to add things into and things like that. So if you're looking to really get under the hood of this game and move some things around and you know tear down the Lego house and build yourself a Lego robot, you can do that.
Yeah, I mean, we just want people to have fun.
Yeah.
We want people to have fun, and we want people to feel comfortable doing the things that they want to do. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
at the end of the day, right? If you look over my shoulder, you see a lot of really tasty RPGs up there. Like,
Oh yes.
Critical Classics is like a tome of different kind of rules, and you end up using only like a fraction of that for whatever you're playing in any kind of thing. Like, most D&D books now are like 300 something pages. Um, However, for the average person to see a book like that, to see a book that thick to play a game, it becomes overwhelming. It can be overwhelming. And we want to encourage as many people who wanted to get into the hobby to have the opportunity to say, hey, I could do this, and to walk away from any session. And, when you write a set of rules, when you write a game, you are not the one that gets to run this game for everybody. You have to make it in a way that anybody can pick this up and run this game. So we wanted to make it simple enough where anybody who like wants to give it a shot as a game runner can feel comfortable doing that. And if you're looking for inspiration, you have spent your entire life, dear viewer, watching TV, reading books, comics, movies. It's all right there. Just do whatever. Like Grounded for Life, you could literally play it to Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Mhm.
Easy. Um, but it's something I take. I know we don't take for granted. I know it's something that we genuinely want to express to anyone who wants to try the game. You can do it too, because you got one dice, you're counting to 10, you're adding one, two, three, you're subtracting one, two, three to the roll, and just tell me what you want to do. So all these games over my shoulder are amazing. They could be a little daunting to a first time player. Our rule set, I think, is like 20 pages, and the font is like super big because we have special eyes. And everything you need to do is like probably like if you go to the back of the book, there's a quick play guide. Just follow that. It's one page. You're good.
Absolutely. And I will say, you're not going to throw your back out carrying this around
Yeah.
with some dice, like you might if you're carrying around all of the D&D books that you may need to do exactly what you're looking to do, or the one meaty tome of Dungeon Crawl Classics.
Which I love. And I
Mhm.
think if we're talking like pure core books, I think like the Dungeon Crawl Classics book is one of the single best RPG tools that I have ever put my hands on. Like
Mhm.
it's perfect. And like you know what? Good on Goodman Games. Like the entire like I think last 14 pages is just ads for people who've made games for them. Like
Mm.
I think they do there's such a class act when it comes to the way they conduct their business, and like I am genuinely happy to spend money on like whatever they put out. But yeah, that big old son bitch is awesome.
Mhm.
That being said, for me, I love the smaller books. That's why we make them A5 size, because
Yeah.
I like the idea that like you can put it in your backpack, you can put it in your back pocket if you have big enough pockets. Like you're not carrying around a lot of stuff to go run and play a game, or if you want to like cuddle up on the couch with a cup of tea or coffee and get comfortable, it's not a big meaty book that you need to worry about. Like you kind of like just you could read it with one hand if you need to.
Yeah.
So I mean, we like that size. I mean, these books are 100 something pages. They'd probably be like 70 or so if we did them like full size. But you know, they look
Mm.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of been a trend recently to do these like digest size books. I know Spencer Campbell does his books in that size, and I know that the Forged in the Dark books are usually that size as well. They end up being a little bit thicker because Forged in the Dark has all those other rules that they throw in there too. But uh, it's definitely been a cool thing to see in RPGs. This kind of new format of here's a smaller thing that you can carry around. You know, the zines that companies have been doing recently is a similar thing. So
Yeah,
you know,
part of my shelf. I think Mork Borg is the same size.
hmm,
You know, it's the perfect size book.
yeah. The only issue with them is you stick them there next to your giant books. I don't have the zine setup very well. Was it you or someone else who had the spinner rack of zines?
I did not have the spinner rack. I thought the spinner rack, if I had a bigger, I live in a basement apartment, which is a
Mhm.
really sweet little apartment, but I don't have the room. But if I had a spinner rack, if I had a bigger house, I have a spinner rack. There is, um, so when you would go to so in New York they're called bodegas. In New Jersey they're called like cigar shops or like
Mhm.
places where you pick up your newspapers and stuff. They'd always have these built into the wall magazine racks. So you'd only be able to fit like an issue or two in each. But they look really cool, kind of going all the way up. I mean, like, and you had like your normal like your Women's Day. You had like your highlights. You had like Sports Illustrated. You had like Fangoria. But then the red racks were all for all the pornography, and they would just kind of it was all very tightly think, but they'd always come up to a point where like you would just see like the head of any kind of magazine or the title of the magazine. Um, those are like impossible to find, but they look great if you could. I mean, obviously, like, they don't hold a lot of stuff, but they look great if I was like looking for them for my old bathroom at my house. So I could
Mhm.
just put them up there, put up magazines in. However, this is something that I think is great for zines. Let me reach over here. I actually happen to have it off screen. So you can get this at Staples, right? I think this
Mhm.
was like 10 or $12. It's got 3 racks, it's pretty deep, and you could fit and display all of your zines in here. And then, like, if I go to do a show, it'll be all 3, 2, and action zines. But, like, my issue with zines and books this size is that it's easy for them to kind of disappear. But at
Mhm.
least there, I'm like, oh, and there's Mothership. Oh, there's a little Brave Little Toaster RPG. It's like this big. $12 at Staples.
No one told me that there was a Brave Little Toaster RPG, and that made me sad. And I'm glad that one exists because I have a mild obsession with those movies. But
So this is from Exalted Funeral and Plus One Experience. I'm sure you can find it on Exalted Funeral, but Tony Vacinda, who is Plus One Experience, um, we're sitting there at PAX Unplugged, and he's going through his bag, and he's got all the stuff that he's promoting now. Let me see if I can find some art that I can show you here on the screen. But, like, the Smears home catalog, it small and large NPCs traversing the suburbs. But he's going through his bag, and, like, the stack of these fall out. I was like, what is that? And so it's not the Brave Little Toaster per se. It's
Mhm.
whatever it has to be for them to be able to put those books in it. But
Mhm.
I was like, I must have this, But, like, I'm glad I have this rack, because otherwise I would have it and I would never look at it again because it's like yay big. But yeah, check it out. Probably Exalted Funeral.
Mhm. Yeah, and just to let everyone know what's going on in my mind here, I grew up watching specifically the Brave Little Toaster Goes to Mars over and over again. And a few years ago, it was before I moved to Nashville, before I got married. I was preparing for all of that, and I watched all three of them in one day. And by the beginning of The Brave Little Toaster Goes to Mars, when they're showing the montage of the appliances meeting the baby and learning to accept the baby as their own, I'm just weeping. I'm a grown man weeping my eyes out during
Oh
this
yeah,
montage, and I'm just like, "What's wrong with me? This is the Brave Little Toaster Goes to Mars."
yeah. The subtext on all those movies, like, you watch them now. Forget if you've not watched an American Tale, and since you were a child, don't, like, you know, 5 Goes West, not any better. Papa, just no. Like, these movies are, like, just meant to land before time. Like, you think, oh, it's just like this happy little movie. Like, but then you actually remember the scarring emotional moment from your childhood. You're like, oh, yeah, this. Now, as an adult that has experienced life, this actually makes me feel so much worse. I'm going to call my therapist now. Like, it gets you. It gets you so good. Also, side note, so I knew there was a Brave Little Toaster. I knew there was, like, a Brave Little Toaster too. Up until I bought this book, I had never known that the Brave Little Toaster went to outer space. And I was like, I guess there really was that time when everything was going to space. It's like, well,
Mhm.
what do we do for part three? Well, let's go to space.
Yep.
I mean, you already have a talking toaster. What else can you consider a stretch at this point?
Mhm. Oh my goodness. I can like sing songs from that movie. For some reason the third one was the one that the library always had on VHS. So I was always watching The Brave Little Toaster Goes to Mars growing up, and it's there in my DNA, and you better believe that my new daughter is going to be watching those movies when she's old enough to comprehend.
I love it. So your town was one of those towns that had the library with the VHS and stuff that you could take out.
Yep.
So I found out. So there's a little library in the town I grew up in, and cool little library, or so I thought. Because as I got older, I found out that, like, kids I knew who lived in that neighborhood, as they became like teenagers, a little older, one went there to get something for like a report, and they stumbled into this little area that was in the way back and kind of tucked away. And they're like, why are all these movies here? So they go up to the front, and ask the librarian, like, well, like, have you always had movies here? Like, oh yeah, there's always movies here that you could take out. And like, well, how come no one ever told us? And she just like said the librarian just kind of turned, opened up a book, and started stamping, and just kind of like, because they didn't want the whole neighborhood like taking out the movies, but you know, that I think is cool. I think it's so cool that like libraries do that. And had we known when we were younger, I definitely would have rented more movies in the library.
Mm-hmm. The library VHS rental is how I watched most of John Wayne's filmography.
Oh,
So
fantastic. Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, that's good stuff.
mhm.
I bring it back.
So, as we're coming up on kind of the end of our time here, I want to give you the chance not only to promote the Kickstarter, but anything else you've got coming up. And obviously, as we mentioned at the top of the show, you do co-host Vintage RPG podcast. That comes out, is it every Monday you guys put out new episodes?
Every Monday, a brand new episode. For the first time in 4 years, we had to do a repeat episode just recently. You know, just sometimes you just run out of time, but normally a new episode every Monday. We've been going 4 years strong. We have Patreon, patreon.com/vintagerpg. We've got early release episodes, a killer Discord community that we'd love for you to be a part of, and so much more. So you black out and you just go there. The Kickstarter is going strong. We have funded. I am confident we are going to unlock Mini Submania. So if you back our Kickstarter, $20 is the physical tier. PDFs are $10. $20 the physical tier. You're going to get a copy of Children of Uma, a physical copy of the rulebook, softcover Children of Uma, a physical copy of the rulebook, PDF of the rulebook, PDF of Children of Uma, a physical pamphlet of Ski Quest, a PDF of Ski Quest, and if we can unlock it, a PDF of Mini Submania as well, which I think we're like $10 away from unlocking Mini Submania right now. So we will. I'm gonna confidently say you're gonna get Mini Submania as well. So for $20, you get a whole lot of stuff. Kickstarter is running until theoretically with Kickstarter's hours Thursday. 10 a.m. But back it before then. Back it and then don't worry about it. Sleep in on Thursday. I will. We are doing Children of Uma right now. Later in the year, we're going to do another Kickstarter for 321 Horror. We have some other surprises up our sleeves as well. And we cannot wait to share them with the world. And I can tell you I'm not going to tell you the title, but the horror pamphlet that I wrote, which is an introduction to the character that will appear in my horror adventure, is some of the proudest I've ever been of anything I've ever written. And it was like 1,287 words because it's a pamphlet and you can't fit much if you want art. That's all I got. Check out the Vintage RPG podcast. Please take a boogie on down to Kickstarter and check out and back Children of Uma. And, if you don't have the money, that's totally cool. Just go to 321actiongames.com, download the rulebook. It's free. There's a free copy of Grind for Life on there as well as a PDF. Just play it with your friends. Enjoy it and come back around when you can. That's what I got. Watch Rollin Bones.
Thank you. And if you are going to listen to Vintage RPG, do Stu a favor. Don't skip the Dragon Riders of the Styx episode. I found that extremely fascinating. That whole thing was just bizarre and fun.
Yo, I learned so much from doing the show that I'm on. Because I am essentially I'm interviewing Stu. And Stu will tell you about all these games. Like I'll talk about some of my experiences, but like really, like I'm interviewing Stu and bringing the information out of him and going, whoa, because I didn't know all this stuff, but now I do, and it's fun.
Absolutely. So don't let that be, as Stu predicted on the show, the episode that like 3 people listened to. As one of those 3 people, that is a good episode and essential listening. So
yeah. It's cool when you find out something that you liked as a kid, but you finally figure out what it is.
Mhm.
A lot of people actually listened to the episode. And people were like very like engaged with it. It's like I had these. So
Absolutely. Well, guys, that is going to do it for tonight's episode of Rollin Bones. Thanks again, Hambone, for coming on. It's always great to have you on the show and talk with you. Coming up next week, we are bringing on, speaking of Dungeon Crawl Classics, Michael Curtis. He's going to be on here to talk all about his role in DCC, and we're going to spend, I imagine, a lot of time talking about Lankmar because I love Lankmar, he loves Lankmar. Hopefully, all of you guys out there love Lankmar as well. And if you have a friend who is really into Fritz Leiber, who for some reason doesn't listen to this show or watch this show, tell them to stop on by because this is the place for them. So until then, guys, whether you rolled a 1 or a 20, I'm so glad that you rolled your bones with me, Ryan Howard. Give Valor Studios a follow on Twitter. Drop us a subscribe here on Twitch. Share this with your friends. And I will see you guys next time.
Thank you for watching Valor Studios on YouTube. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications.